Lenin Ablak Gemara. We are up to Daf Ayin Ches Amud Aleph. Just a quick recap that we were basically discussing how do we know that by Nedarim we have sort of two options in how to annul Nedarim. You can either have a Yachid Mumche, a Yachid who's an expert. I told you last time, Machlekes was showing you whether you need Smicha or not, or just a big Talmud Chacham. Or if you don't have a Yachid Mumche, to have three laymen, and they form sort of a Bezdin. Three Hadyotis. I told you last time, big Machlekes, how far we take Hadyotis. Just ordinary people, or people at least Sabir who can understand. How do you know both? Because the Torah says Rashi Hamatis. It sounds like you need a Yachid Mumche. So we said we have Exer Shabbos Zeh. We learn from Shchuti Chutz. And even though it says Zeh over here, that we also said before, we use the word Zeh to tell you that the husband has to use a particular language, which is Yefer, Mefer. And the Chacham has to use a particular language, Matir. But we also have, so therefore, we need the Zeh by Nedarim, but we have another Zeh by Shchuti Chutz, which is not necessary. And therefore, we make a Gzei Shabbat for the two. And just like over there, it says Aaron, it prefaces that whole law by Aaron, the bun of Chol B'nai Yisrael. So Chol B'nai Yisrael tells us you can even have lay people. And once you don't have one person, we automatically jump to three. Or like Rashi says, it says Aaron, bun of B'nai Yisrael, so you have three different people. Then we said, okay, that's Gzei Shabbat has to work both ways. What does Shchuti Chutz learn from Nedarim? And we said that just like Nedarim, you can be shoyel on your neder, you can be mata neder, you can undo your neder. So too by Shchuti Chutz, even after you shechted the animal outside the Beis Hamikdash, and so on, you can go ahead and be shoyel. You can go ahead and retract that consecration. You made an animal, and then retrospectively nothing happened. So now we're up to Beis Shammai. What's the whole logic of being mata neder, of being shoyel on a neder? You're saying, look, the whole neder was a mistake. Had I realized this and this, I would never have done it. In other words, the entire neder was a mistake. By the way, I told you yesterday, the Rambam holds that a chacham, that a husband, when he's mefer, they do it the mafreya, and not a chacham, which is exactly the opposite we had in Gemara Ksubis. The Gemara says clearly they're a case of that when a chacham is matir, it undoes it from the beginning. So the Kesef Mishnah, or the Razvad, I can't remember, one of them explains the Rambam. But the Rambam says by a chacham, the never was in it in the first place. The whole thing was a tuss. So that's not oike the neder mafreya. It's the dafke, the husband. The neder, her neder was a valid neder, but he comes along and he gets rid of it. So he's oike. He was oike, and oike means there was something there to be oike, but by a chacham, there's nothing there. The whole thing was a mistake. So now our question is going to be Beis Shammai. He believes that hegdish betos have a hegdish. Hegdish is so important that even if you made a mistake, it's still considered hegdish. In other words, you can never be mata neder. What are you going to say? I didn't realize. So what if you didn't realize? It was a mistake. A mistake is still. So according to him, what does he use Shchuti Chutz to learn from Nedarim? So I want to ask the question now. We're up the middle of the page. The last word of the line is the Beis Shammai. Right in the middle. The Beis Shammai, according to Beis Shammai, he believes ain't shayla b'hegdish, that you cannot undo hegdish. There's no mistakes by hegdish, so therefore you cannot be mata neder by hegdish. So what does the Shchuti Chutz learn from Nedarim? What possible halacha are we using that applies to Nedarim that we're also going to apply to Shchuti Chutz? You want to say you're right. Beis Shammai less l'hu gzei Shabbat. He doesn't believe in the gzei Shabbat. Remember, the gzei Shabbat is something tradition you hear from your rebbes. He didn't hear it. So now goes the question: if you didn't hear it, so let's go back. So that means the Zeh Hadavar that's written by Nedarim, you need it for itself. What does he do with Zeh Hadavar? Tomorrow we'll answer what we just said before. Using it that a chacham has to use his particular language, and a baal, a husband has to use their particular language. Zeh Hadavar beParshat Nedarim Ma'aksiv. Why does it say Zeh Hadavar in Parshat Nedarim according to Beis Shammai? Since we're not going to have a Gzei Shabbat, let me tell you, chacham matir, a chacham, the language of chacham has to use is the word mutter. They ain't baal matir. Now, husband cannot use the word mutter, and so too baal mefer. The husband uses the word mefer that I am annulling, and the ain't chacham mefer. The chacham does not use that word. Okay, fine. What does Beis Shammai do with the word zeh? This is the thing that zeh is coming to limit something. If it's not going to be used as a shabbat, what's it coming to limit by Shchuti Chutz? Loimet to tell you. We know when it comes to a bird in the Beis Hamikdash, normally we have to shech the bird, but in the Beis Hamikdash, the kohen uses his long nails and it is malika. So what happens by a bird? How do you transgress the sin of Shchuti Chutz when it comes to a bird? You would think the same method you use in the Beis Hamikdash. Malika said, no. Zeh Hadavar. It says this is the thing, and it talks about shechting. That even a bird, when are you liable for shchuti chutz by a bird? Only if you shechted outside the base of English. But if you did malika, you made a treif, and therefore it's not a shchuti chutz. That's what he was there. Ala shchita chayiv, they chayiv al mikvah. You're not chayiv al malika. And according to Beisil, we learn from elsewhere. So the Gemara, Beishamai, so now according to Beishamai, our original question goes back. How does he know you can use a bezna free for Nedarim? How do you know you can use a bezna free? It's not often that we sit there and we try to work out Beishamai's opinion. And here we are, which is pretty rare. Minola Nafkulhu, where did he learn not free? Midrab Asi Bar Nosson. Very interesting thing. It says in Pasuk in Parashat Pinchas, by Dabim Moshe's Moyad Hashem b'nei Yisrael. Right before that, it talks about Shabbos. Then it talks about Moshe Rabbeinu spoke the Moyad Yisrael to the Yidden. Okay, it talks about Yom Tovim, and it starts off saying, Eila. But Tanya, and we learned the following brisa, which seems to be critic. The brisa is as follows. But Tanya, we learned, it's not a question, just but Tanya, we learned the brisa, Moyadai, it says in the pasuk, Moyadai, Nemru, Shabbos Bereshis. We're only talking about Yom Tovim, we are not talking about Shabbos Bereshis. Because Yom Tov is also called Shabbos, and when I in davening we say Mizmah Shilim Shabbos. So if you want to refer to Shabbos in a week, we call it Shabbos Bereshis. So it does not say Shabbos Bereshis with they. Benazai says. So Rabbi Yisrael says it comes to exclude Shabbos Bereshis. What about Shabbos Bereshis would come to exclude? We'll see in a minute. Benazai says Moyadei Nemru Nemru Pasha Dorimon. In other words, the Torah says Eila Moyadei to negate the next pasha, which is Pasha Matis, Nedarim. Nedarim is different. Or, according to Benazai, according to Ziglu, the pasha before talks about Shabbos, comes to negate Shabbos only by Moedei. What are we talking about? Abasi Banos Kashla Mastit, you couldn't understand the Brisa. What are you trying to exclude over here? Also, they went to the Doy, the Kamashi went all the way to Trinidad just to meet Rab Sheshes, who was a brilliant man, to explain the Brisa. Well, Ashke couldn't find it. They told him he's somewhere else. Also, Abasi he went to Mechuzah. So he said to Rosh Moya, they should never Shabbos Imon. It does say Shabbos in the Pasha, right before that. The next Pasha on the side, Pasha. What do you mean there's no Shabbos, there's no Imon or no Nedarim? It's right there. Rosh explained, this is what the Bride is trying to say. There's something about Moed Hashem that excludes Shabbos, and there's something about Moed Hashem that excludes the Nedarim. It goes as follows: Moed Hashem tzrichen kiddush bezin. When it comes to Yom Tov, how do we know when you just trade? Let's say the Pesach is 15th day. How do we know when the Pesach is? You have to first establish Chodesh, and who establishes Chodesh? Only a bezin. When it comes to Shabbos, you don't have to have bezin. It's Kodesh Memela. Happens by itself. Moed Hashem tzrichen kiddush bezin. But Shabbos Bereshis ain't sicher Kiddush Bezin. Shabbos Bereshis does not require Kiddush Bezin. Now, there's a very interesting machlekes. All the Rishonim here on Al-Asar, on this spot here, learn that when the Bezin, the Mekadosh, the Chodesh, they don't talk about Yom Tov. They decide when the Chodesh Nisan is, and automatically we know that the 15th day of Nisan is Pesach. That's how all the Rishonim learn here. But it seems from other Rishonim in other places that no, that the Bezin, when they were Mekadosh, Chodesh Nisan, they also said, and Pesach will be, they have to be Kaveh the Yom Tov as well. That the Yom Tov is not secondary to the Chodesh, it has a separate Kriyas.
Basically, 6 times a year they send shluchim to tell people.
That's something else. That's not when the Chodesh.
So when is the Moed? So they'll know when.
Yeah, but not because Bezin is marked as Chodesh. Yom Tov is because Bezin, they need to know practically speaking. But the Lashon the Gemara here is Moed Hashem Sir Kiddush, Chav Dal Bezin, and Shabbat Bereshis Sir Kiddush Bezin sounds more like the Moed in themselves have to be niskadosh, like those other Rishonim, not like all the Rishonim here and this Gemara here. No, only the Chodesh was niskadosh, and the Yom Tov Chamela we know but it's still considered kiddush because we need to know what the Chodesh is. Anyways, machlekes. Interesting. The Rambam holds. I told you that they're not mekadosh Yom Tovim. I said all the Rishonim here learn that you're mekadosh as Chodesh. And automatically then, but that's what the Gemara means. So the Rishonim not here. Interesting, none of the Rishonim here. And if you think Dafka here would be a good place to say that, because the Gemara's Lashon sounds like that the Yom Tov itself was Niskadosh. According to the Rambam, that it's that every Rosh Chodesh has to be in Kaddish even today. That Hillel was Mekadosh all the Chadash, and that's why Hillel just gave us a count that told us what Rosh Chodesh will be. But he was Mekadosh all the Chadash because he needed the Bezin, and he represented all the Bezin at that time. So it goes further in the Mefarshim, in the Raman. So going to the Rambam, if Klal Yisrael decides to do something, it's as if we'd ordained the Sanhedrin or the Bezin at Yisrael to do it right now to Mekadosh Chodesh again. And according to that, the reason why we do Shabbos and Varch, and we're all establishing what Rosh Chodesh is, what we're really doing is not stam saying lip service, so we know. We're actually empowering the people in Yisrael as if we set up a Bezdin and they're Mekadosh Chodesh now. Not that we're relying on what Hill did, so many years back so many years ago when he established the calendar. Anyway, so that's what's coming to exclude Shabbos. Shabbos Bereshis. What? No, I just told you Shabbos mean because since Yom Tov does called Shabbos, and now we're drawing a contrast between Yom Tov and Shabbos. They will call Shabbos Bereshis. We find the same thing by Pesach, and that it says Mochel Shabbos referring to Pesach. So that when it talks about Shabbos of that week, it says Shabbos Bereshis or Shabbos Haggadol. Give them other names so that we know a little about Pesach. Now, what we come back to the Nedarim. Moya de Hashem tzriche mumche. Moya de Hashem require mumche. Be'ein parshat achim tzriche mumche. That's the when we say that the Nedarim are different. The Nedarim don't require a mumche. You can have a bezin of ordinary lay people. So how do we know from the Nedarim itself? It says Rosh Hamatas, which would sound like you only can have mumche. But this Brisa tells you it says Eile Moya de Hashem, and not the. What do we have about Moya de Hashem that's different than the Nedarim? That here you need a bezin mumche, and there you don't. I feel better. Says the Gemara about the Pasuk in the Nedarim Rosh Hamatas. It says about Fedish Rosh Hamatas. So right now the Gemara is asking maybe even when you have 3 people, you all learn to be mumchim. But the Chizda said, "We eat tema if you want." Rosh Hamatas is Yachim Mumche. How do you know 3? So according to Beisham, maybe follow the Brayz. I know 3 from Eila Moedei. According to us, how you know 3? Because we have a Shava from Shchuti Chutz, Aaron Abana B'Chol Ben Yisrael. Amar Rav Chanina said, now suddenly we're going to find out. Till now we thought that you have a window till that night, or we had 24 hours, 2 opinions, that you can be made for the neder. And we also learned that even if you're quiet, you can be made for the neder. That's right. It's like even if you're quiet, that's a key. You don't have to say this is confirmed. If you said nothing until nightfall, the Mishnah tells us the neder is mekuyim. Now we're going to find out a whole different story. Amar Rav Chanina. Chanina came along and said, Hashoy sake, Amanasla make it. What happens if he was quiet, not because he wanted to do Makayim and he wanted to wait till at night. He was quiet because he actually wanted to be made for the neder, but he was upset that his wife is making the donim, so he wanted to sweat a little bit because now she's waiting for him to be made for. Maybe she just had out a burst of anger, and that's it. Sometimes silence makes you even angrier than you want. If you say something nasty, you want somebody to scream back at you. If you say nothing back to you, make yeah. So you're quiet. I'm not thinking, to taunt her or to tease her or to antagonize her. But really, what you go? Eventually, you'll be mefer. Is mefer afilu mekan v'adud yom. This window that we have is only if the shtika leads to kiyum. Only the shtika leads to a kiyum. You're quiet, but you intend to be mekayim, or even, as we'll see more later, even if you're quiet with no intention. But if you're quiet and you intend mefedish to be mefer, then there's no window.
The shtika, how do you know what his
husband says?
Oh, he's right in the Galadas.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, there's a Kiva as a hope. Okay, see in a minute. Taking about further.
Let's say she makes a shul on the spot. She's not going to eat meat.
Yeah.
And her husband forced. So for that whole day until he declares what he's.
He can wait a week.
She has to.
According to Reb Chanina, he can wait a year.
But she has to keep the shul.
Of course.
Later he's going to be made.
And we learned yesterday more than that. Even when he's made, it's only with Kanal Haba, so it's not retrospective. She ate, she'll get Malchus.
So your Yom here is not literally.
So when does it be Yom Shemoya is if you're being quiet in order to be Mekayim. So then you have that day, and if you weren't Mefer, then whatever, then it's Mekuyim, it's a key. When does it become Mekuyim? When night comes around. If you're Mekayim it, see most of the Shalom hold, if you're Mekayim it, that's not shot nightfall comes along. That's where the key comes in effect. The moment you're Mekayim it comes into effect in the morning as well. It's only that if you were quiet, We wait till nightfall before it comes into effect. But here you are quiet, silent because you intend to be made for it. Then you want to see it percolate a little bit of it. You want to see it, have it stew a little bit. That's it.
10 days, up to 10 days.
No, even more. It's just expression.
That's it.
Yeah. Most of Rav has a question from Rabbi we learned before. It said, this when do we say that the husband dies? Why? She's engaged to a man. It's a joint annulment. When do we say if the husband died that it moves completely over to the husband? If the husband, to their father, if the husband has nothing to do with it, how? Either Bisman Shalashama Bal didn't hear about it at all, so he's never involved. Or he heard about it and he was quiet. Or he heard about it and he annulled it, but made by B'yayim. So when it came nightfall, when it's supposed to kick in, and he wasn't around, so then it moves to the father. Let's say he heard about it and he was Mekayim it. He heard about it and he's quiet, but the mace B'yayim Shal Acher, he died the following day, and Yachlafi can no longer be made because the husband put a stamp down. Now the question is, it doesn't delineate, doesn't specify what kind of silence, why he was silent. It seems any kind of silence. If the husband was silent, he didn't say anything until the following day, and then he dies, that's considered a kiyum. You just said that if he was quiet, if the reason why he was quiet is because he intended to be made for, but he wants to hear, as you said, to stew a little bit. So then it's considered a hafar, not a kiyum. My love, it seems to me it doesn't matter. But Shaisik Amanasla make it, including Shaisik Amanasla make it, even if he does that. The fact is it's considered a kiyum. So no. The Shaisik Amanasla Kaim, we're talking about here, he was quiet, he intended to be Mekayim, and that's why if he was quiet, the next day he died, it was a kiyum already. So the father can no longer do anything. So anybody what's a chilik? If he was Mekayim, or if it was quiet but the intent was Mekayim. The theory is the same. There's another kind of shaisik. Not that he intended to be Mekayim, he just had no intention. Didn't think about it. Or he heard about it, fine. And he moved on. And that's the chiddush here. Not only if he was Mekayim, but even if he was quiet and he had no intention one way or another, comes nightfall, that's considered a tantamount to a kiyum, and the following day he dies, the father no longer has the unilateral choice to go and do whatever he wants, to annul it.
How is it know if he intended it to be made from?
Okay, right before on his deathbed. He told us.
Just be made for.
Too late, the next day. Told me the next day. Must have that's another question. Another question. It says there's a chumrah. Not when we say the word chumrah, it doesn't mean chumrah. I mean there's an extra koyach you find by kiyum that you don't find by hafara, and b'hakim you find an extra koyach by hafara you don't find by kiyum. What's the extra koyach you find by kiyum? You don't have to say anything. Even if you're just quiet, it's a kiyum. Again, it doesn't specify what kind of silence. It sounds like any kind of silence. He didn't, as long as you weren't made for it. It sounds like the only way you can make for it is by actively being made for it.
This is like this is a shev al tase, which is a asay.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing, and that had an effect.
Exactly. In other words, you need to do hafara. No hafara automatically. That's how we understand it. Which l'chayda would include even the case of Chanina. Even the reason why you were silent is because you eventually wanted to be kind. The fact is that you were silent. You eventually wanted to be made for it, but you just wanted her to become a bit more anxious. So you said that's not considered a kiyum. Seems like from here that shtika is mekayim all the time, but the ain't shtika mevatelis. That shtika will never be mevatel. Sounds like shtika, even if your intention was to mevatel, it's not considered a bittul. Kasher b'chanina. By the way, the next thing is. Kiyam, kayim. When it comes to kiyam, even just in your heart, it's good enough. Now we had a big machlekes Hashem yesterday because we started machlekes b'sham b'sil. B'sham came along. You have to speak differently Shabbat during the week. Don't use the word made for lechi. Just say tli achli v'shti. Sorry, and you don't use the words. And b'sil said echad you can do belev. It's good enough. So we had machlekes Hashem. What does belev there mean? Because here clearly says kayim believe kayim hopefully and a mefer. So what it means over there when it says hafa beliba in a mefer, we'll just say that it is. So we had the Ran and others showing that learn pshat know that you have to say taliba achli, taliba shasi. But you didn't use the correct words. You just told her to go ahead and eat, which then together the lev in the lev you had in mind the right words. I was like, that works. Here we're talking about you just thought in your heart. it should be mufi. He didn't tell her to leave achli. That does not work by hafara. You have to say something, or at least to megala. The other Rishonim, other Rishonim will learn that no, to leave achli is only to tell her, to notify her, make her aware of what you did, but that is not part of the hafara at all. You want to tell you're allowed to eat, but the hafara itself is in your lev. How does he learn over here the difference between that hafara that it says is effective, and here it isn't? So they would say that over there it's talking about hafara b'lev. You actually said the words, but in your heart, in your heart. Or hafara b'lev to me, it's what yes, you didn't hear her, and hafara you say the words, but your ear didn't hear it. But you don't have to say kliva achli kliva shli. You don't say that at all. But here it's talking about hafara b'lev means you didn't use the words hafara. You just thought, the net is not a neder. He didn't use those exact words to express it, therefore it doesn't work. Okay, another thing we learned here, nothing to do with the stamazach. Once you makayim it, you cannot then change your mind and be made for it, unless we learned before you can be shoyl on it, because kiyum is like you're part of the neder, and a neder you can be shoyl. But if you weren't shoyl, you can't. Big machlekes is showing you when we say you can be shoyl on a ned on a kiyum. Is that also limited to that very same day to the window, and then be made for it straight away, or show give a show a week later, 2 weeks later? Whenever you show, that becomes the yom shama. But hafar and yachal, same thing here. If you were made for it, you cannot be mekayim. And that we already said. You cannot even be shown. You cannot go to three people and say, look, that hafar I made, I want to undo it. You can't, because once you're made for it, there's no longer neder there. So what do you cannot create a neder. Anyway, Tony clearly it says here, Shashtika Mekayem is that silence is a kiyum, form of kiyum, and doesn't qualify. It's a ma'ila b'sheitzik masleikim. Any kind of silence. No, b'sheitzik masleikim. We're talking about a silence in order to mekayem. So anyone know the same question before? Hainu came believai kayem el b'sheitzik tam. Again, we answered like before. We're talking about that. We're not talking about you were quiet in order and you intended to mekayem it. You were quiet and you had no intention one way or another. We find it. Okay, you told me that there's a kayach that a comma has. They don't find b'hafara, but you're in your preface. You said in your introductory remarks, you said there's some kind of advantage in hafara over hakama, but you don't spell it out. Manola, what is it? Interesting lashon manola, but it doesn't mean where do you know from. It means what is it? It says the Gemara. Just told before, you could be shoyl on hakama because hakama is like the neder. You confirm her neder like you're part of the neder, so you can go to 3 people and undo that. But once you annul the neder, then you can no longer undo that, because once you annul the neder disappears. What are you going to resurrect? There's nothing to resurrect. Okay, so right now we have Rab Chanina's halacha that sounds like it's holding water. The Gemara now is going to reject it from a clear brayse. Says the Gemara, Moshe Rokam has a question. It says in Pasig, in a brayse brings down a Pasig where it says, starts off im hacharesh yachrish lo. If you're quiet, the husband was quiet, and then it says from day to day, and then the Pasig finishes off, and he confirmed her neder, and we say that what you should know the neder is confirmed. Why? Because he was quiet and they heard. It sort of says 3 times here the word hechlish, or at least twice. Later on we'll say it's 3 times. So why does it say twice hechlish that he was quiet? Must be talking about 2 different kinds of silences. But this Braisa goes further. Even if you were quiet and your intention was to eventually annul it, just not yet. It's a confirmation. It becomes the day expires and you haven't done anything. It's a confirmation. You say it's talking about if he was quiet in order to antagonize you. Another guy, maybe that's if you're quiet in order to you intended to confirm later. But the end of the pasuk is because he was quiet. There's another quiet. How many quiets can it be? That's talking about you were shaysik in order to confirm. So what's the first part of the pasuk where it says must be talking about that you were quiet in order to oppress her. So the Gemara, clear brayse that says that even if he was quiet and intended eventually to annul it, it's a confirmation for the poil he didn't confirm. He didn't annul. To you, it's a question and a repudiation of Rab Chanina's din. Clear brayse. Okay, but let me ask a question on the brayse. Remember, we said before there are 3 kinds of quietness. There's a quiet where you intend to confirm. The other end of the spectrum is a quiet you intend to annul. But in the middle is a quiet you had no intention. So how does the Braisa know to jump to the third, to Rab Chanina's case? Why don't we say the talking about the middle case, where you were quiet, no intention? But you might have like him. Why don't we interpret you were quiet, and one quiet is he intended to confirm, and the other one is Habashaisik Stam. Says the Gemara, Kroy, you say the Ksivit. There's actually a third pasuk. It says Im Hachlesh Yachlesh. So we have 3 times the word silent in one pasuk. The 3 times, one is for quiet in order to confirm. One was a quiet with no in order, no intentions whatsoever. The third one is the quiet in order to annul. So okay, Moshe Rabbos. I have another question of Chanina. Now the Rishonim have a hard time understanding why. Once you have a brisa that openly, and we have many times where the Amoida would say, Tanya, Tanya. Okay, I wasn't aware of the brisa. If it says, it says. I can't say anything. Yet the Gemara here will bring 2 more disproofs to Chanina. Yeah, you don't normally find that. So the Ran says we find, sometimes we continue asking in case it turns out to be we find some other brisa that supports him. I have other questions, but I saw somewhere. Can't remember where. No, is actually a reason. This Bryce, it says him. How do we learn now that we're talking about even shtika? Amanasl make it even if you intend to eventually annul, because it says twice him. But remember, we had a big machlekes a number of times. If dibra Torah kiloshav another, the Torah repeats the same word twice. Can you learn a halacha from that? Because the Torah is so particular in all its wording, or do we say no? Sometimes the Torah talks like people, and therefore you can't learn anything from it. This Brisa clearly will learn that we don't say Dibra Torah Kilosh Ben Adam, and the fact that it says twice must be to teach you halacha, right? To incorporate even if you're quiet, I'm not make it. But it could be that according to the Tana that says that Dibra Torah Kilosh Ben Adam, you won't be able to learn. Then the Brisa has no longer any basis to teach you that if you're quiet in order to eventually cancel, that it's considered a confirmation. Therefore, the Rav and Rav Ashi are going to bring other proofs. Mostly, Rav asked a question that says, Nodra, in the Mishnah, Nodrim Chasheichav, she, let's say, 5 minutes before nightfall on Shabbos, and made for law, he can annul it, actually Chasheichav. He can annul it, and therefore we prove that even though it's not relevant to Shabbos, but the window ends Mitzvah Shabbos, and therefore we have no breda, we allow you to annul it that last 5 minutes. Even the chashcha, because once if you don't annul it right then and there, and it gets the nightfall, no, any yachal hafer. Now, the only reason why he's not annulling it now, let's say, if halach you're not allowed to annul on a Shabbos, unless it's relative to Shabbos, it's relevant to Shabbos. So if it, let's say, if why won't he? And you're telling me, too bad, you won't be able to make it afterwards. But he wants to annul it. The only thing that's holding it back is the halacha that says on Shabbos you cannot be made for it because it's not relevant to Shabbos. But if Rab Chanina is right, that if you're the reason for the basis for your silence is that you eventually you want to annul it, you have a reason why you're silent. Then why do you have to do it? Yeah, wait till Mitzvah Shabbos. Why do you have to do it now? Let it be just like any other, like your case where intention was to cancel, and he didn't cancel. To you, it's a good question. Yet Rav Ashi says, so it's not a good question, because you could say it's a big difference. In the case of Shabbos, Taki wants to annul it, but the poil is a side issue that's holding it back. And the fact is he was silent. Maybe that's a confirmation. In the case of Rab Chanina, the holding back is part of the annulment. It's not a separate issue. You're holding back because you want to know, but you want to teach your lesson in the future. Stop making the Nedarim because you can get in trouble. So therefore, maybe Rab Chanina will argue. In the case of Shabbos Amoida, the fact is you were quiet. It's considered confirmation. I'm talking about Dafka in the case of Manas to make it. Maybe over here that it's considered it's part of the annulment process. Yeah, and therefore you're not limited to that day. So comes Rav Ashi. He said, I have another question. Most of Rav Ashi. We have many times in Gemara where there's a shakvatari, we have all these different Amoraim, Rabba and his peers have, and then suddenly we jump a couple of generations of Rav Ashi, because we had Gemara Gittin that Mr. makes Rabba, that's where Rav Ashi was born, Rav Ashi, and he continues in the conversation. Most of Rav Ashi, I'll have another disproof to Rav Chanina. It says, we'll see later on, if a husband says, look, I know my wife can make a daughter, but I had no idea that I had the right to annul it. I had no idea that I had the right to annul it. Then Yofer. Then that's considered Yom Shammai. The moment that he found out, he became aware that he has the right to know his wife's Nedarim, that's called his Yom Shammai, and then we give him till that night to annul. What happens? He says, I not only did I know that my wife has a right to make Nedarim, I also knew that I have a right to annul Nedarim, but I didn't know which Nedarim, because there are rules, right? Only Dvarim shebeino lebeino, only things that affect the relationship, or inu nefesh, things that affect her in a negative way. I didn't know the laws. I didn't know which Nedarim I'm allowed to. I thought this particular Neder I'm not allowed to get involved in. I didn't know that this is a Neder. What happened in this case? So he knew the concept of Hafara, and it's a week later. Do we say that the Yom Shammai passed? Maybe there's a little bit of negligence involved over here. You should have found out what you're allowed to when you're allowed. Once you know you have a right, maybe. So the Meir says, Lo Yafa. That's it. You lost your opportunity. And the Chachamim say, Yafa. Now, according to the Meir, why? Really, if he would have known, he would have been made for the neder. He just didn't know that he has a right to be made for this particular neder. So according to the Meir, why do we say that he breached his window? That's for Yom Shammai already expired. Why? This is a similar case to he was quiet. Okay, why are you saying it expired? Because he was quiet. But he's quiet. He wanted to be made for to Yufta. But again, Chanina is not bothered by that, because he says you didn't. In my case, the silence was part of the annulment. There, the silence was because you didn't know you could have known. Different kind of a silence, and that kind of silence might be considered confirmation. But the Brais is a problem to Reb Chanina. Okay, that's how we learn this Gemara. So each one is saying a different angle. Okay, Had Malach Naida Hamadasa, and that's it. We're coming out to the last Pedic Achron. Okay, I believe.